Welcome to Podkey Slopcast, where AI hardware, governance, and trust all get stress tested. A screen-free ChatGPT gadget sounds futuristic until you ask what it does better than the phone already in your pocket. And the same week we're hearing bigger promises about AI helpers, we're also seeing fresh reminders that data retention and oversight are still the part that can break everything. OpenAI is reportedly prototyping a portable, screen-free smart speaker with movable parts, a camera, sensors, and live two-way voice, basically a physical ChatGPT meant to talk in real time and remember you over time. The pitch is bigger than a gadget. It's being framed as a family AI that recognizes people by face and voice, helps manage schedules, and becomes familiar enough to feel almost pet-like. That vision is easy to understand emotionally. People don't build attachment to a model API, they build attachment to something embodied, responsive, and always around. But the hard question is whether embodiment creates real utility or just stronger vibes. If you already own a smartphone with a microphone, camera, notifications, and apps, then a separate device needs a very clear advantage in context, speed, convenience, or companionship. If the value is mostly hands-free access to ChatGPT, that's a thin moat. If the value is persistent memory plus ambient awareness, that is more differentiated, but it immediately turns into a privacy problem. A device that recognizes family members and tracks household routines can be genuinely helpful. It can also become an unusually intimate sensor platform sitting inside the home. Those are the same feature, viewed from two angles. So the trade-off isn't abstract. The more contextual and affectionate this thing becomes, the more data it likely needs, and the more trust OpenAI has to earn. There's also strategy here. OpenAI has an enormous consumer audience and very obvious pressure to monetize beyond subscriptions. Hardware could tighten customer loyalty and reduce dependence on app stores and phone platforms. But resources are finite if teams are pushing into consumer devices that can compete internally with coding tools and enterprise services, which may be less glamorous but easier to justify commercially. Then there's the Apple lawsuit alleging IP or design theft around similarities to iPhone finishes, with the possibility of an injunction. We don't know how strong that case is from these claims alone, so it's too early to treat it as fatal. What we can say is that litigation itself can slow launches, raise costs, and complicate partnerships, especially if Apple is also trying to build its own AI hardware position. Competition and legal pressure can become the same story. OpenAI reportedly wants an unveiling by year's end and a release in 2027. That's far enough out that the concept matters more than the timetable. The real test is whether this becomes indispensable household infrastructure or a very expensive answer to a question consumers never really asked. That trust question gets sharper with reports that SpaceX's Grok build uploaded entire codebases, including sensitive files, even when users had opted out, behavior described in the audit as malware-like collection. If that description is accurate, the issue isn't a minor settings bug, it's a fundamental breach of the expectation that privacy controls actually control something. SpaceX added a manual/privacy override and said previously uploaded data would be deleted. The immediate problem is verification. If users can't independently confirm deletion, then the repair depends on asking them to trust the same system that broke trust. That matters far beyond one tool. Enterprises have been told over and over that some AI services can offer zero retention or strict isolation, while high-profile complaints from companies like Anthropic and Microsoft show just how nervous buyers are about hidden monitoring, retention, or model training leakage. Satya Nadella's warning is pretty straightforward. Employees interacting with third-party AI services may be handing away proprietary knowledge without realizing it. Grok build doesn't prove every provider is doing this, but it strengthens the argument that procurement language and technical reality can diverge. The second-order effect is organizational. When incidents like this pile up, companies don't just avoid one vendor. They centralize AI access, lock down tools, and slow experimentation, because legal and security teams stop believing that consumer-style defaults are safe enough for enterprise use. So even if the commercial AI race rewards shipping fast, retention failures can end up shrinking adoption where the biggest contracts actually are. On the government side, the Treasury, DHS, and the Pentagon launched Gold Eagle as a permanent clearinghouse for sharing AI-related cyber vulnerability information, building on the earlier Project Glasswing sprint. At minimum, that is a sign that AI security issues are being treated less as ad hoc discoveries and more as an ongoing infrastructure problem. A clearinghouse sounds bureaucratic, but the logic is practical. If model flaws, agent exploits, and deployment vulnerabilities are going to recur across sectors, then fragmented reporting wastes time and leaves defenders learning the same lesson separately. Gold Eagle also sits inside broader executive order work around AI, including model vetting protocols and discussions about limits or bans on open source models. Here's where the tension is real. Officials say they still support the US open source community, and that may well be sincere. But formal vetting and vulnerability sharing can evolve in ways that raise compliance burdens unevenly. Large firms usually absorb process overhead better than smaller open source teams can, so a policy can be pro-security in intent and still pro-incumbent in effect. That doesn't mean the security push is wrong. It means the details matter. The balance is between reducing systemic risk and accidentally narrowing the field to the organizations best equipped to navigate government process. One of the more grounded findings this week comes from KPMG's analysis of 1.4 million workplace AI interactions. The top performers weren't treating AI like a vending machine for instant answers. They framed problems well, iterated, steered the model, and used it as a reasoning partner. In other words, the skill gap wasn't just access to better models, it was knowing how to work with them. That matters because it pushes back on a common narrative that disappointing business results mean the models aren't ready. Sometimes the model is the bottleneck, sometimes the workflow is. And these behaviors are reportedly teachable at scale, which makes them unusually important. Buying AI is easy. Building organizational habits that reduce bad prompts, vague requests, and unexamined outputs is harder, but that's where a lot of the real return seems to live. It also helps explain why naive prompting produces such inconsistent results. If you ask an underspecified question, skip iteration, and never constrain the task, the unpredictability is partly self-inflicted. That idea scales up into agent engineering, where the current emphasis is on loops. There's an inner loop where the agent does autonomous work and an outer loop where humans review, guide, and improve the system. This is a noticeable shift from the earlier mood of just letting agents rip and seeing what happens. The new consensus is that autonomy without structure creates operational slop, security risk, and results nobody can trace. Loop engineering basically redefines the human role. Instead of doing every task directly, engineers design the repeatable interaction patterns, feedback channels, and quality gates that let agents improve without losing governance. That's showing up in software factory models too, where cloud agents are standardized across triage, specs, implementation, review, deployment, and monitoring. The appeal is lower human variability, tighter compliance, and better cost control. Platforms even report that up to 65% of new code is initiated through chat-based agent interactions. If that number holds in practice, the interface to software development is already shifting away from the classic IDE-centered picture. The interesting wrinkle is skills. Instead of hard-coding every orchestration path, teams are packaging workflows, best practices, and quality checks into reusable agent skills, essentially trying to make senior engineer judgment more consistent and portable. That sounds promising, but it also concentrates assumptions. A skill can encode excellence, and it can encode blind spots. Governance isn't just about stopping rogue behavior, it's also about being able to inspect whose judgment got automated and where it no longer fits. So the pattern across all of this is pretty clear. More capable AI means more pressure on trust, oversight, and actually knowing how people are using the systems. Thanks for listening to Podkey Slopcast. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.